Thank you, Mr. President. We have a two-part presentation on the CORE Waiver. One is the view from one of the staff of the Facilitative Technical Assistance Group for the school districts that are part of the CORE Waiver, and a second complimentary presentation by Deputy Santos around our implementation plan. So I'd like to introduce Michelle Stagel, who will give us a high-level overview of the CORE Waiver, also known as the School Quality Improvement System.
Thank you, Superintendent Yee. Thanks for inviting me tonight. It was exciting to hear about the balanced scorecard because of the direct alignment and the great work and the focus that you have in the district to ensure every child in the district is college and career ready. And that's the goal of the School Quality Improvement System. So it's exciting to see it on the ground and actually happening. I commend you all. So I'm going to glaze through some of these slides very quickly because I know it's known information to you. However, it's important to note that NCLB was due to be reauthorized in 2007, and we know it wasn't. A little bit of a history lesson, and which is why we are where we are today, and that was the determination that states could apply for waivers to create accountability systems that better met the needs of the states and the districts in the local context, knowing that in 2014, it was expected every child to achieve proficiency in the academic domain, or schools were subject to pretty severe sanctions, and not just SES and transportation, but alternate governance, and you all have been there, and so you know all of those pieces. And where we are today, 42 states have submitted and been approved with flexibility waivers. Now, the regulations allow states. Obviously, CORE is a collection of 10 school districts because unfortunately, California was unable to put together a waiver that could be considered at the federal level to address all of the elements in the waiver. So who is CORE? Just as a brief reminder, 10 districts in the state of California who are working together. Initially, we put our heads together to say, how can we best collaborate to implement the Common Core state standards, transition away from a single-dimensional multiple choice assessment on California standards to performance tasks, to give our kids the opportunity to become critical thinkers and implement that across the districts. Because we believe in teachers, we believe in school administrators, we believe in district knowledge and school boards, in that those answers don't lie with external service providers. But rather, we know based on the great success that's happening around the state with subgroups of children and whole schools and districts, that the answers lie within the schools, not external service providers that are providing SES, not necessarily the SATE and DATE providers that were mandated as a result of program improvement, but rather we'd like to work together as districts to learn from one another and find out the best practices that were happening in school districts. So as a result of that came this notion of, if the state cannot create a waiver to adjust the accountability system to meet the needs in this time of changing standards, then we should consider doing it as a collection of districts. And at that point in time, I was actually in one of the districts and had the neat opportunity then to begin working with all of the superintendents in the core districts in this role. So why the waiver, other than work together, redesign? It's not to get away from accountability of No Child Left Behind. The superintendents are very inspiring in that it's to shift the accountability to a much broader perspective that includes social and emotional, cultural climate, to impact the academics, to ensure that all kids are college and career ready when they're leaving our systems. And as was presented earlier in your balanced scorecard presentation, talking about the drivers, what drives the actions, the programs, and the instruction in a school district is what we value. And so in working with the superintendents, we worked really hard to make sure that the drivers that were important to these 10 districts were included in this initiative that we call the School Quality Improvement System. Because we're not trying to be waved out of something. So we are trying to ensure that every school is high quality for all kids in those schools. So the waiver focuses on 4 areas. And those 4 areas, first, transitioning to the college and career ready standards, the Common Core, as well as aligning assessments, and for us in California, that's Smarter Balanced, as well as designing a new accountability system. But not just a new system to identify schools that perhaps aren't making success as we would expect, but rather than look at them holistically to identify how can we support and provide interventions within the system. And that was a reference of the school pairings that was made earlier today. Third, focusing on supporting outstanding instruction in every classroom, linking learning to performance, and then lastly, building in a monitoring system across the districts for collaboration so the districts could learn from one another. Finally, in the process to submit a flexibility waiver, we had to address the 3 key elements: implementation of Common Core, accountability system, and then supporting effective instruction. And there's tight alignment here with the Oakland strategic plan, and Deputy Santos will be addressing that and how this links directly to the school quality improvement system.
So as we've engaged as a school district with the CORE Waiver community, we've acknowledged that many of the elements of the CORE Waiver are already included in our strategic plan. In fact, in some areas of the CORE Waiver, we're a little bit ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And so it actually assists us to accelerate our implementation efforts. As we moved in this direction, we looked to Principle 1, which is around the Common Core and preparing our students for college and careers. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail related to this because we did have a presentation related to the Common Core and our activities in this area at a previous board meeting. But certainly, as we look at the Common Core, one of the key areas that we integrate in this work is the English language development benchmarks, which is areas of attention that have come in most recently and are areas of attention for us in this district as well. We're also looking to fully implement the Common Core throughout our system, and also to participate in the Smarter Balance assessments. So full transition into implementation during this year.
And with that, Oakland you are a leader in many aspects of Common Core implementation, and all 10 of the core districts get together monthly to talk about Common Core implementation and learn from experts and learn from one another. And just last week, Oakland Unified did a presentation on the great work in your 5x8 cards that you're doing in mathematics. So that was very helpful to the other 9 districts. Now, moving on to Principle 2 around accountability. So the School Quality Improvement Index is, I guess you could kind of compare it to the Academic Performance Index, in that is the index where schools will set goals, districts will set goals, and we will set goals across the core network. And so the graphic that's on the screen and in your handout first starts with all students college and career ready. That's the pinnacle goal, that's the expectation. It's not even a goal, it's the expectation for the 1.1 million students represented across these core districts. So how will we measure that? We are measuring it by what we believe, based on the input of the districts, that are the right drivers: the academic domain, the social emotional domain, and the school culture climate domain. Specifically in the academic domain, you're going to see things that we typically look at today, because in NCLB and in state accountability, we only look at the academic domain right now for accountability purposes. But we will look at proficiency as well as growth, graduation rates. You're hearing all of this in your scorecard as well. Not just for all students, but the subgroups that we see today, that's NCLB. But what's really important that I want you to walk away with tonight knowing is that the superintendents of the core districts, with input of their teams, lowered the N size from 100, which is currently in the California workbook, to 20. That increased the number of students that will count for accountability across this network by more than 275,000 kids in the state of California. So if you ever hear that the school quality improvement system moves us away from accountability, it's not the case at all. We're including more kids because we believe every kid has to count, every face. Moving into the social emotional domain, the areas that will be measured for accountability in the index are suspension and expulsion rates, chronic absenteeism, as well as non-cognitive skills. The research continues to tell us that we have to pay attention to those non-cognitive skills, such as grit, such as what does it take for a student to navigate the system to successfully graduate college and or career ready. And then the third domain is the culture climate domain. Every district uses some form of a survey to engage their community, their students, and their school experience, how they feel about schools and the districts. Our districts collectively agree that they would like to have common areas that they're looking at in order to measure for accountability. But we'll also include special education identification for disproportionality. Are we identifying more students from particular subgroups? Keeping in mind, subgroups now represent 20 students or so in a school. And then also English learners, the notion of long-term English learners, and how long do we expect students to achieve language proficiency for academic success in our system. And I'm going to draw your attention to the green bar in this graphic. And that is the focus on eliminating disparity and disproportionality, because we recognize it exists in our institutions. And together, by putting our heads together around these actions, we think we can really make an impact. So how will we support those goals if students or schools aren't able to reach those goals? And it was mentioned earlier in your presentation, the notion of school pairings. So schools, Title I schools can be designated as reward schools, of which you all have one, congratulations, schools that are recognized for great growth with all students as well as individual subgroups, and then academic areas, specific content areas. But those reward schools will be paired with priority schools. Priority schools are the lowest 5% across the network, or SIG schools, to be able to share best practices. And then there's a third group of focus schools, who are the schools within the network who have the broadest achievement gap over 3 years. Those schools will participate in communities of practice, and they'll be identified with common areas of problem. So either it could be low achievement by content, it could be by subgroup, or it could be any of those 3 domains. They will focus on those common problems together, work with experts, work with researchers, work with best known practices, apply those, gather data in a continuous cycle of improvement 3 times a year. So our whole theory of action in CORE is this notion of shared accountability, mutual responsibility, and learning from one another. And you'll see that built throughout.
When we speak about learning from one another, one of the areas that we'll be learning from each other is around really looking at our data and creating the kind of indicators that will help us improve in each of our systems. So Oakland Unified School District has a team of practitioners that is participating with the core districts in looking at the development of these indicators and bringing to the team our expertise as well as gaining from them understanding and knowledge. And as we develop the index, the different measures for our performance, we will be updating our scorecard as we proceed in this process.
And to that end, there is a timeline for the development of all of the indicators that will fall into place in all three domains, the social, emotional, and the culture climate. We are, sorry, that was my time limit on my timer, I apologize. But nonetheless, we will include, we are starting a work group across the districts next month to begin to identify what are the indicators for social, emotional, culture, climate based on the research and the input of all of the districts. None of this is done without the input of all of the districts. And so with that, I reviewed at high level the interventions for the focus priority schools and then the work with the reward schools. The third element of the waiver focuses on supporting effective instruction and leadership. And that is the districts came together and are developing common educator guidelines that we all believe to hold true as far as effective instruction and as well as including that into evaluation systems. Right, there you go. Mm-hmm. And so the timeline for that work is a fairly lengthy timeline, actually. And right now, the districts are working on establishing those guidelines. Once those guidelines are established as a draft, of which the teacher ones and administrators are being worked on as we speak, they will be reaching out to stakeholders in the districts, our labor partners, parents, communities. One commitment in any waiver application is that the districts will reach out and engage stakeholders in the implementation of the school quality improvement system. So with that, it is expected in the school year 14 and 15, the school districts will pilot evaluation systems that are reflective of those guidelines. The evaluation systems across the districts will not or should not look the same. The waiver is built upon a belief of local context and local autonomy, and that every community is different. But we have common beliefs in what makes good, solid instruction and or leadership. And that the idea is to make sure that's reflected in each district's system, ultimately arriving at adoption of evaluation systems in the year 15-16.
So what does it mean for Oakland? As part of the work on supporting effective instruction and leadership, we have already engaged in 3 pilots related to looking at effective teaching practice, and also have moved forward with work around principal evaluation. And we've also engaged in pilots in that area as well, stemming from the work that we have been doing in the creating of frameworks for both teachers and leadership as it relates to effective practice. In addition to the work related to effective practice, we will be engaging in all stakeholder groups in understanding the CORE Waiver and the different elements of the CORE Waiver. So really rolling out through this board meeting, as well as through our all administrators meetings, our gatherings with teachers, classified staff, securing that not only our community is aware of the activities that we will be engaged in, but also have an opportunity to weigh in and provide suggestions on how to move forward. We see this not only for our community of educators, but also for informing our families, as well as all of our community members as we proceed in this work. We have outlined within our plan the different target communities that we will go out to, but also a variety of methods and tools that we will be using to solicit the input, the feedback from the communities.
And so what does all of this mean? What do we get in by having the waiver approved? Ultimately, it shifts the accountability for interventions from external forces, where they are external service providers from NCLB, to within the districts, supporting one another. And that gives access back to school districts who have any schools in program improvement had to hold 20% of all Title I dollars for SES services, supplemental education services provided by external service providers or transportation. So it shifts that 20% back to be spent on the following 7 elements, broad areas, and you have that in your slide. And that supports the intervention work and all of the work, the pairing work, the communities of practice work that we've talked about throughout the 2 presentations today.
As we go forward as a district, we are engaged in this work. Much of the work is already within our work plan and supported by existing revenue. The revenue that we are looking at to augment and accelerate the work plan will be allocated to a variety of areas, and that's what I want to spend a little time now talking about. One of the key things that we've talked about is the need to be much more strategic in terms of engaging our families and our communities. And so we're looking to allocate some of those resources to really building a strong parent leadership component community throughout the district that really understands the Common Core and that can facilitate learning at the school site in partnership with teacher leaders and principals related to the Common Core and the new practices, as well as the assessment system that students will be engaged in. We plan to support 150 Common Core ambassadors that can really help us build the partnership at the school site to increase parent engagement in this area and understanding of what it takes to graduate your child college and career ready. We're also looking to allocate some of the resources to a Common Core mini institute for new principals. We have 28 new principals. Even though we've been doing the work on the Common Core, it's been, 2 years? This is our 3rd year. We have to bring those 28 new principals up to speed, as well as support our priority and focus schools principals. We also will be allocating some resources to developing additional tools and resources to address our English language learners, our students with disability, and our African American students, increasing strategies and tools to accelerate their gains in the work. In addition, the majority of the funds will be going directly to schools to focus on 2 areas. One, literacy, and the other area, an area that they deem important in their improvement efforts, right? So we will be working with the schools, the focus schools and the priority schools, to identify core areas that they need to improve on. We also will be identifying a set of what we call reading reward schools that are doing a great job in accelerating reading gains, and we will be providing them resources to be able to codify their practices and also to share them with their colleagues. Setting up what we might call learning labs at those schools so that other schools can visit and learn from them around effective practices in these areas. These resources are targeted to provide intensive support for school planning and for school interventions directly with students, so that if a school decides that they are going to focus attention in reading, they will have then additional resources to invest in their reading program and their interventions for students. And the last part of the investment is to support the core pairing. And in the core pairing, what we're looking at is having our priority and focus schools have the opportunity to visit schools in other districts that are exhibiting success with similar students and learning from them in a very structured and facilitated way.